I am currently teaching a spirituality course online. I have students enrolled from Kansas, Oregon, Merced. Basically, in this course, I assign them spiritual experiences to take on. And largely, there's a little more to it than this, but largely when we come back together, we debrief the experience. And I say there's only one rule, is you have to be honest. You could say that was meaningful, that was boring, I felt like God spoke to me, that was a waste of time, whatever you want. So last week, I assigned them a solo field trip that I was hoping would be inspirational. I said, I want you to take your journal by yourself, be ready to go, and I want you to spend an hour alone in silence at a cemetery. And while you are there, I want you to walk around and I want you to visualize and imagine your own decaying corpse. Kind of a trippy exercise. I didn't create this. People have been doing this for a long time. Surprisingly, when we got back and I said, what was the experience like? Some people didn't enjoy it, if you can believe that. One older gentleman said, all I experienced was a feeling of loss. A loss of my life, of my family, of seeing my grandchildren. It felt like everything that mattered to me was gone forever. But there were some others that had a different experience. And the main positive reaction was, I felt like it was an end of my problems. A final sense of peace, that all the conflict within my little world was over, and now in the next world or the next reality, everything was finally the way that it should be. Two different experiences or viewpoints of the same experience. We are in our second week of a series that we're calling Apocalypse Now. It's a wonderful title. And we're exploring some of the major themes of that most strange book in the Bible, the book of Revelation. It has inspired everything from conspiracy theories to doomsday cults to Stephen King novels and television series to songs by groups like the Depeche Mode or the White Stripes. And today's passage we're going to look at kind of corresponds to everything that you might have in your mind about the book of Revelation. Here we find a spiritual leader that we don't know a whole lot about, John of Patmos, he's referred to, who's been exiled into a prison island. He's all by himself because of his faith. And I imagine that he's alone. He's probably in a fasting state. He's doing some breath work, some meditation. He's reciting some of the sacred texts that he had memorized. And in that kind of period of being open to the spirit of his creator, he begins to have a vision. And what he sees is something like everyone's favorite field trip to the cemetery. People have different reactions to what he sees. Now, I just want to say, after I'm done talking this morning, we're going to have some time to interact together. Ryan or someone will have a mic, so if you have a question about something I said, if you have a comment, if you want to make it more exciting here and you want to publicly tell me I'm wrong, we can do all of that. We'll have some time to interact together. So if something comes up, keep that in mind. So there are quite a lot of trippy images in our text today, and I kind of have cut it down a little bit because we could spend hours on it, but to try to get to its essence. Revelation chapter 5, verse 6. John says, I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of a throne. Now, Revelation 6, verse 1. The Lamb opened the first of 7 seals. Before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow. He rode out bent on conquest. When the Lamb opened the second seal, another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. When the Lamb opened the third seal, before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. I heard a voice saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages. When the Lamb opened the fourth seal, before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. If you've watched a lot of Westerns, they like to refer to this verse here. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. They called out, "How long, Lord, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" He opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black. The moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to earth. The heavens receded, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the generals, the rich, and everyone else hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains, "Fall on us, hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb." Revelation 7, verse 9. I looked, and there was a great multitude from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They cried out, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." Now, as my buddy who loves to go surfing down in Laguna Beach would say, these texts are rad. There is a lot here. They are anything but boring. I want to name what I think is two unusual perspectives that John's vision gives us of kind of ultimate reality. Maybe you want to use the word metaphysics if you're in the university world like I am. And then mention a few implications for those of us who are open to live out the apocalypse now, if you will. So the first unusual perspective is that ultimate reality is best understood through the image of a slain lamb. Ultimate reality is best understood through the image of a slain lamb, which obviously represents the kind, loving, self-giving Jesus of Nazareth. Now, this is counterintuitive. This is certainly countercultural. That this God of love, this God who is filled with other-centeredness, this God that is a being of blessing, is what or whom is most foundationally true everywhere in all of reality. And John's vision is implying it only appears like, briefly, that rich and powerful and violent people rule the world. But in reality, its personal, eternal love is what is most true. Again, verse 5, he said, "I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of a throne, a meek, sacrificial lamb as the one on the throne of everything." Now, I want to be clear. John's vision is claiming that this kind, self-giving, slain lamb embodies ultimate reality. Not church, necessarily. Not pastors. I mean, Ryan's great, but not Ryan. I would say not even organized Christianity all the time. At its best, church and organized Christianity and pastors, at our best, we are pointing to say, no, ultimate reality is this lamb. But it's not necessarily these things. A second unusual perspective we find in this vision is that because ultimate reality is love, the world as we know it will end. Some may find this depressing, kind of like that field trip to the cemetery, but plenty of others welcome it. Let me say that again. Because ultimate reality is love, the world as we know it will end. I don't know if you watched the first season of HBO's True Detective. In my opinion, probably the greatest writing on display so far in any kind of scripted serial drama. But in that first season, there's lots of heavy scenes, but there's one particular heavy scene I'm referring to this morning where Detective Russ Cole, who's played by Matthew McConaughey, is sharing with some other police investigators. And here he kind of sounds like John the Revelator, if you will. Here's what Cole says. 14 straight hours of staring at DBs. That's detective talk for dead bodies. Have you ever done that? You look in their eyes. It doesn't matter if they were dead. You can still read them. And you know what you see? They welcomed it. Not at first, but right there. At the last instant, there's an unmistakable relief. Because they were afraid, but now that they saw for the very first time how easy it was to just let go and find out that you didn't have to hold on so tight. Now, Russ Cole is a good guy in this series, not a bad guy. So why would this detective suggest that victims, at least at the end, are welcoming death, welcoming the end to everything that they've known and cared about? What kind of person would welcome the end of everything as it is? Again, going back to chapter 6, 9, and 10, where John says, I saw under the altar souls. They called out, how long, Lord, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood? Who are ones who would welcome an end to everything as we know? Those whose lives have been filled with suffering. Those people would. You know, the median household income in the United States right now is $68,000 a year. If that's what you make, you know, money's pretty tight. It's pretty hard to get by. But if that's where your family is, again, the whole family, the entire household is making $68,000 a year, you are quite literally in the top 1% richest people in the entire world. Probably most people in this room, compared to most people in the world, are considered rich. If you earn that $68K a year as a household, you make 24 times what the global median household income is a year. Big difference. Right now, 2022, the majority of the world, most people alive, 54% roughly of the global population does not live in a nation state that has anything like a democracy. Most people who are alive right now live in a context where a few people basically do whatever they want, and they are poor people that even in mass have really no say at all in what goes on in their culture. There are plenty of people who would welcome an end to life as we know it right now. There are plenty of people, maybe most people, where life is primarily suffering. So again, just to recap briefly, again, number one, ultimate reality is best understood through the image of a slain lamb. At least that's what John sees in his prayerful vision. And number two, there's the implication, because ultimate reality is love, the world as we know it will end. Because for a lot of people, this is not a great space. Now, I want to mention a few implications, again, as we kind of consider this apocalypse right now. Beware of basing your life decisions on what works. Instead, focus on what is good or virtuous. After all, at least according to John, this is the foundation of everything. You see, people who hurt other people who make others' lives miserable, never think that that's what they are doing. They generally have a mindset of they're just following what seems to be practical, what seems like it'll work best. Jeffrey Epstein probably just thought he's living a good life. I mean, he hit the lottery, got a lot of money, and he's just able to hang out with the ladies like a lot of other guys wish they could. That's probably what went through his mind. Vladimir Putin thinks it makes sense for Russia's security and national interest to shoot missiles into apartment buildings. It's practical. It's being realistic about what politics are like in the international world. People that we hear about on the news or maybe even in your neighborhood, sadly, that are engaged in drive-by shootings, they think it makes total sense. I'm protecting my neighborhood, I'm protecting my friends, or they probably even think what they are doing is just, and those people had it coming to them. John saw, again, chapter 7, verse 9, a great multitude standing before the throne and before the Lamb. Again, before a slain lamb. Not before the most strategic or the most successful or those who had put together a perfect plan that's going to make everything work. I mean, to most of us, a slain lamb is too weak. A slain lamb is too given over to what others want. Generals and business tycoons and rulers live in the world of what's realistic and what's practical. So what guides your life? Primarily, think about when you're making important decisions. Is it simply what will work? Or is it ever what is the most good, even if it doesn't always work for me? That is the most good thing to do. Friends, if we treat our intimate relationships or our coworkers or our employees simply according to what makes sense to us, to what seems most practical, over time we will relate to them in such a way, we might not know it, but they are privately praying to God, asking that He do something about you. That's what it's like to be on the receiving end of people that just live according to what they think is practical. The type of connection that people want from you, that they need from you, would feel to you like you are being a slain lamb. Like you are giving more to them than you are receiving. That's what it feels like to relate to people in a healthy way for them. So again, what is your mindset? What works or what is good? Second thing, to live in alignment with ultimate reality, you will need to become more inclusive than makes you feel comfortable. More inclusive than you feel comfortable, whether you are conservative or progressive. Chapter 7, verse 9. Again, I looked and there was a great multitude from every nation, tribe, people, and language standing before the Lamb. They cried out, "Salvation belongs to our God." Now, John the Revelator was given this vision again 2,000 years ago, give or take. And I don't have words to describe how startlingly countercultural this vision would be. In the first century, that God's people, the vindicated, are from everywhere and all sorts of cultures. Now, I know there's got to be a few people here in 2022 that are like, oh, great, here. Now someone's up front here at church talking about how we need to be more inclusive. I'm tired of this conversation. So, of course, to bring in the professor to talk about diversity, we hear all this PC stuff all the time. I'm sure a couple of you are thinking that. But let me remind you of C.S. Lewis. Died 60 years ago, old white guy, anything but progressive. He wrote books that were defending historic faith against modernity. He even referred to himself as a dinosaur, okay? Not a progressive guy. But in his novel, The Last Battle, he writes something that I think is kind of profound. And in this scene, we have the Tisroc is standing at the end of everything before Aslan, who is a lion who represents Jesus. This is too long, but it's good, so I'm going to read it. Then I fell at his feet, and I thought, surely this is the hour of death, for the lion will know that I have served Tash all my day and not him. But the glorious one bent down his golden head and touched my forehead with his tongue and said, Son, thou art welcome. But I said, Alas, Lord, I am no son of thine, but the servant of Tash. He answered, Child, all the service thou hast done to Tash, I account as service done to me. Then I overcame my fear, and I said, Lord, is it then true, as the ape said, that thou and Tash are one? The lion growled, so that the earth shook and said, It is false. Not because he and I are one, but because we are opposites. I take to me the services which thou hast done to him, for I and he are of such different kinds that no service which is vile can be done to me, and none which is not vile can be done to him. Therefore, if any man swear by Tash and keep his oath for the oath's sake, it is by me that he is truly sworn, though he know it not, and it is I who reward him. And if any man do a cruelty in my name, then though he says the name Aslan, it is Tash whom he serves, and by Tash his deed is accepted. Dost thou understand, child? Those who seek what is good and what is virtuous are aligned with ultimate reality. They are aligned with the Lamb, and those who don't are not. Friends, most of us in this room certainly and thankfully don't judge people based on the color of their skin or their ethnic heritage or how much money they make. However, we may need to watch judging people based on their official positions, their opinions on controversial matters, their official political camp. Again, quoting Lewis through Aslan, I and he are of such different kinds that no service which is vile can be done to me, and none which is not vile can be done to him. Is your friend group, those you care about, those you are learning from, is it expanding? People from different ethnic backgrounds? But what about different political opinions? What about a different spiritual background than you have? If they are still seeking the good. It's better to be close to someone who you think has the wrong official views but has the right character than to be close to someone who you believe has the right views but they have the wrong character. One more. If John's vision of the world as we know it coming to an end sounds terrible, you may be centered in more privilege than you realize. When I lived and pastored back east, I was good friends with a woman in her 70s who had all sorts of health challenges. But despite that, despite all the hospital visits, she wanted to keep on ticking. She would say to me, "Brian, I love my life and I never want to die." I mean, she had real problems. I would say, "Why would you say that?" Well, her family was close. They all lived close by. And her adult children all had healthy marriages, and they gave her lots of grandchildren. And she was a retired executive. And she made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in retirement. She could buy whatever she wanted. She could do almost whatever she wanted with her family. And so a passage like this from Revelation would terrify her. She wanted to live forever in the world the way that it is. Friends, if life is about being happy and accomplishing your dreams and drinking great wine with beautiful people, then this vision that John received, this reality of God, feels cruel. Like God's going to throw a big old giant turd in your punch bowl of a life. But if you've lived a difficult life, like most people who've ever lived, or if you concern yourself with the experiences of others who are suffering right now, you know that John's vision sounds like ultimate relief and welcome. So what is your gut reaction personally to this vision of the Lamb sending out the 4 horsemen to overturn the world as it is? How do you feel about that? And what does that feeling tell you about you and what ultimately matters to you? Okay, I said we'll have some time to interact together. If you have a question, a comment, if you want to push back, tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, you can put your hand up and Ryan will come around with the mic.
Whenever I do come, I will hold the mic in front of you awkwardly, and I will not let go.
You want me to stand or you want me to do it? Okay. I was just going to say on that last piece about the tongues, like the different tongues and like the people that are represented, the freedom that I've experienced in getting outside of like my like spiritual or theological interpretation of being a neighbor has allowed me to see like different microaggressions that has guarded me from accessing to other people. I've been in this like recent journey, so I'm saying I'm affirming absolutely what was being shared, and so maybe like some encouragement is that what I've been learning as I've been trying to like dive into a lot of like the native practices coming from the Philippines and how closely they align with who I believe Jesus is outside of like colonial influence. And one of the things practices that we share culturally is saying "Tao ako," or "I'm a human." So before doorbells, when you like knock on someone's hut, you'd say like "Tao ako," and the person on the inside say "I'm a person too" in Tagalog as well. And so I'm seeing this like the way in which like, hey, if we are people, what are those things that are keeping the good intent, as you mentioned, from us seeing each other, from being close? Maybe someone who believes differently than I of how they perceive who God is, but like, am I going to allow that from seeing them and then allowing the Spirit to move like in that space? So like I've seen it, I've experienced it. I know that when you take a deep dive, and like remove the veils of the things that folks have been put on you to access who God is, it's a wonderful thing to experience that revelation.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing, and that's a beautiful phrase. I would definitely affirm right now, modern Western culture, and I think most of us know what we mean by Western culture. That's North America, Europe, largely Australia. We kind of live so much in the moment, we've lost a history of different ways of connecting with God and being open to reality. And so it seems to me right now that if we are Western Christians who only read Western Christian resources, we end up with a smaller view of God. But if we have the capacity to understand things more globally and read from some people from different parts of the world, I think we'll find more resonance with what we even see in the Bible. And it doesn't mean that people that look like me, that there's necessarily something wrong with us or we need to apologize for being Western. Our ancestors were more like the rest of the world if we went about 500 or 600 years ago too. And so even some earlier Western writing can be helpful. But I very much agree with what you're saying and find that helpful. Thank you. Someone else, question, comment, disagreement?
I appreciate kind of everything you shared. I was curious about, it felt, and I could be interpreting some of this wrong, it felt like there was some of this ultimate reality is escaping from the here and now. And when I think sometimes around like the Lord's Prayer, the King, like your will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
And some of kind of those moments, it felt like I was trying to reconcile what does it look like for the kingdom to be here and now?
Yep.
But then ultimate reality is like, hey, let's let go, let's just go away type thing.
Yep.
How do I reconcile those kind of in this?
Wonderful question. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Obviously, to just start with, different books of the Bible are going to have different emphases. And it doesn't mean they're all disagreeing with one another, but they're kind of giving us different angles on our walk with God. So certainly the book of Revelation is the let go of all this, and you're not going to find what you're looking for here, and that is to come. And that's certainly true, where other books of the Bible that we'll talk more about what are we doing right now. So a couple of thoughts. One, we, and by we I mean all of us in our culture right now, are historically an anomaly. Most people who've ever lived assume they would never find what they're looking for until the next world. We are highly unusual people that actually think if we read enough and get a good enough education and are open-minded enough and work hard enough, life can be amazing. And it's not really true. But that is baked into all of us. And so we naturally start to be like, what? This escape stuff makes me uncomfortable. So that's part of it. I would also say false spirituality would have a focus on the afterlife, but would say what you do here doesn't matter. That's false spirituality. True spirituality in the way of Jesus would say you're never going to find what you're looking for here. Ultimately, what you are looking for is the world beyond, but it matters incredibly how you live right here. That's how you live in connection to it. You're not going to make the world all better. You're not. Sorry, you're not going to. You're not going to end all suffering. But if you want to be connected to what you are ultimately looking for in your little sphere, you will try to end suffering. In your relationships, you will try to be other-centered. You will be forgiving because that's how you have that connection. So one way of saying is this life is everything. That's wrong. Another way is to say it doesn't really matter what we do here. It doesn't matter what we do to the earth. It doesn't matter how we treat people. All that matters is we get there. That's wrong too. how you live here is intimately connected with what you're looking for there. Great question. Thank you. Thank you for
I
bringing
think
that
we got time for one more succinct question and one more succinct response.
up. Yeah, that
So just
second part's
don't
kind of
go
hard.
too deep,
I'm sorry.
because then we will all feel like we were left with nothing. Yeah, one more.
Brian, can you just say again, that was really good, about having the right heart and different views? I can't remember exactly how you said it. Was really good.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's.
Can you restate that? Like
being connected to people with the right sphere but the wrong.
Okay, thank you. Again, forgive me, I'm being professor guy thinking too much history here. We tend to think in our culture, how you value if a person is a good person or not is, do they have the right opinions on whatever the matter is? It could be the right official theology, it could be the right political views, it could be the right views on a controversial social matter. Most Christians who've ever lived until about 200 years ago would not see it that way. What is most important is what we would call the fruit of the Spirit in biblical language. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. It's not that what people believe doesn't matter. Of course, it has some bearing. But in our culture, we overemphasize that and not enough on what kind of person we are becoming. And I think the vision we get from the slain lamb, and I would say the vision I think we get from the whole Bible, is if what matters most is the character of people and who they are, and less about, now, what is your official view on this? But again, we tend to do the opposite.